I'm excited for this season of Rocket Motivation because my firm, Hand, Arundel, Harrison Sale, Attorneys at Law, where I am a partner, is our sponsor. We understand life and running a business can be challenging, but with the right support, it can also be incredibly rewarding. That's why we're thrilled to announce our partnership with Hand, Arundel, Harrison Sale.
I'm thinking, when am I going to be hit? I'm waiting for that bullet to hit me. It's not until it's all over till you realize how serious it was. They say it only occurred over 6 minutes. It seemed like 30 to me, of course. It affects your whole family. It doesn't just affect you when you have an experience like this. To rely on your faith, to rely on your family. I mean, they're there for you. And you will need to be there for them just as much as they are there for you. Life is fragile. When you kiss your wife goodbye in the mornings, you may never see her again. And you got to be ready for that.
Hey everyone, this is Rod Cade, and welcome to this week's episode of Rocket Motivation Podcast. 12 years ago, this week's guest was face-to-face with a gunman. He was, and still is, the lawyer for Bay County, Florida School Board, and was attending a typical school board meeting when a gunman came in, threatened those present, and eventually began shooting. This week's guest tells the story of what it was like literally staring down the barrel of a gun. He's also my law partner, and how the incident has affected his life. Franklin Harrison, welcome to Rocket Motivation Podcast.
Well, I'm glad to be here, Rod.
All right, Franklin. Well, thanks for coming on, because this is a great story that the listeners are about to hear. But before we get into that, go ahead and kind of tell us where you are now in your life. You know, what you do, family, where you live. You know, all that kind of stuff. Just kind of catch us up.
Sure. I live in Panama City, Florida, and I've been practicing law for, I guess, 51 years now. And I'm the Florida manager of the Hand, Arundel, Harrison Sale offices from Destin to Panama City. And I practice mostly in real estate law and school law quite a bit still, and still enjoy the practice of law, still at it full time. And I have 5 grandchildren, 3 children, and a wonderful wife of 51 years. And I just enjoy what I do.
All right. Sounds great. Well, let's go back, Franklin. Let's go back to December 14, 2010. Go ahead and set the scene for us and take us through what happened.
Well, it was a fun school board meeting. It was December. It was Christmassy. We had a lot of children there, a lot of parents, grandparents, honoring people, all of that. Had a ROTC color guard, the whole works. And it was all very typical. And toward the end of the meeting, we were discussing, of all things, head lice and a head lice policy. And we started giggling about knit free and this, that, and the other. And then all of a sudden, just out of nowhere, as far as we were concerned, this rather large gentleman came up to the side on the wall with a red spray paint can and sprayed a big red circle and sprayed a V through it. And we're thinking, what in the world is going on? And then he turned around with a gun in his hand. And we said, oh. And he ordered everybody in the school board meeting room, everybody out. News media had their cameras running, and they just left them running. And it was live feed anyway. We had it, all of our school board meetings were done that way over the internet. He had everybody leave, had particularly the women to leave. That was very important. We had one woman school board member, Ginger Littleton, made her leave and left us there with the 4 male school board members, the superintendent and myself, up on the raised platform. And he started parading around with his gun, and we couldn't figure out exactly what he wanted to talk about. And the way it's set up is we're up high or raised. On the right end is a half door that goes into the audience. On the left end is a half door that goes into the audience. There's a hallway with a door down that way, but there is really no place to go. And he started, in fact, he walked up on the platform behind us, talking and carrying on about, had to do with something about his wife losing her job. We didn't know what it was. And in the midst of that, when he had his back to the door, Mrs. Littleton came walking out with this large purse in her hand and whacked him as hard as she could on his hand and knocked the gun out of his hand. Crazy. But she, by God, was not going to leave us in there by herself without doing so. He knocked her to the ground, but he didn't shoot her. And I thought, well, okay, maybe this is something we're going to be able to talk about. He came back down and paraded around. We figured out it was something about his wife losing her job. As it turns out, the superintendent had non-renewed her because she was a probationary employee. In fact, he consulted me, and based on my advice, he non-renewed her, but we didn't know any of that at the time. And one of the school board members tried to reason with him. I'll meet with you. I'll meet with your wife. What can I do? I've got a family, grandchildren. You need to think through what you're doing. And then the superintendent, started trying to talk to him and said, listen, I made that decision. These people didn't make that decision. If you got a complaint, it's with me and not with these people. I mean, it was an attempt, but he was there for a purpose. Then we heard the sirens when the police were coming, and he heard them also. And then he got serious, and he walked over and he fired the gun directly at the superintendent. And the superintendent had back in those days, we had paper agenda books, right, and it was about 4 inches thick. And when he shot, the bullet went into that paperwork. And it was a hollow-nosed bullet designed to kill. But when it went into the paper, it opened up and it stopped. But it threw the papers into the superintendent, and I thought he was shot dead. Right. He hit the floor. And then he started. Yeah,
because it knocked him. It knocked him back. When the papers hit him, he falls backwards. And then, so you're thinking he's shot.
Oh, he's shot. There's no question in my mind that he shot the superintendent.
Okay.
And there's not going to be any more talking here. And so then he, as I look at the video, I don't remember it at the time, but he had a misfire at the floor. And then he turned over to where I was and was ready to fire or fired. I don't know. But of course, we all then dropped to the ground. And I had been accused by my secretary, who happened to be watching it live, of being too slow jumping down. And I may have been the last one down, but I was slow, and I was. And we were down there on our hands and knees. The only thing between us and them was plywood, because that's all there is. And he leaned over and fired and did some more shots. And then we had our security guard, our head of our security for the school system, a former board member, had approached him in the beginning to try to get his attention, then went out to his vehicle and got a vest and put it on and got a real big handgun and came in, and he shot the man. Well, we didn't know what to do. We're on the floor, and we just hear gunfire. And he ended up shooting him twice, and the guy fell to the ground and shot himself and killed himself. There is a piece of my nameplate where I sit that has a big bullet hole in it, and the bullet lodged in the drawer that was right in front of me, in the front of the drawer in the back of it, and we're on the ground. And then the shooting stops, and we look to see who shot. And luckily, nobody was shot. Nobody except the shooter. And then as we got up, the SWAT team comes running in. Well, they don't know who the good guys and who the bad guys are. They have no idea. And so suddenly we're all on the ground. It ain't us. It's him. One line over there in the pool of blood. And they figured it out. And then I went over to our security guard. That's not a good term. He was head of security, former policeman, former board member. And I had to console him. He was so upset because he was shooting at the shooter in our direction, though. Yeah. And he was so afraid that he was going to shoot us. Luckily, he did not, and he accomplished what he needed to do.
Oh gosh! Now, and I need to tell everybody, because Franklin, when you told me this story, and you told me, you can go watch the video of it, because I highly recommend anybody who is listening to this show go to YouTube and just put in Bay County, Florida school board shooting. There's multiple videos up, and Franklin is actually, if you're looking at like where the shooter was looking at where everybody was sitting. Superintendent's in the middle. Franklin is two to his right, so two to the left of where you're looking. Franklin gave a great explanation of what happened, but like they say, picture's worth 1,000 words. It is so stunning and eerie to watch that. And so I highly recommend going to look at it. But so Franklin, when I watch that, I'm just thinking, holy cow, different things are going on. But I guess when he pulls out the gun for the first time, what's going through your mind?
Well, it's just surreal. I mean, you're trying to figure out what is going on. What does he want? Where are we going? There's no place to go. You're captive. You have absolutely no control. He has total control of the situation, and you're just there waiting to see what he does. Somebody you don't know, and you don't know why he's there. And the guy, you tell me where I sit. The guy sitting next to me, he's still on the board. That was his very first meeting after being elected. And he walked into that.
Oh, gosh.
It was really, he said, this is what being on the school board is about.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's just.
But anyway, the feeling was that you had no control. And of course, we had no control.
Yeah.
And we just had to sit there and figure out what he was going to do next. And luckily, he was not a very good shot. I've learned from talking to the police after that, even with all of their training, those close arms fire, they're not very accurate.
Right.
And he was not accurate.
All right. So, I know you're concerned. He's got the gun but once the shooting starts and you're on the ground, so when you're on the ground, so you don't see, you hear the shots, you hear a bunch of shots. At that point, what are you thinking?
I'm thinking, when am I going to be hit? I'm waiting for that bullet to hit me. We had a circuit judge some years ago in Gulf County who somebody came into his courtroom with a gun, and he went into the bathroom and leaned against the door, and the gunman shot through the plywood door and killed him. That's what I thought about. That's all I've got down there is the plywood, and they keep shooting.
And to take that a step further, you're sitting there just kind of waiting to be shot. What else what are you thinking about then, other than, I guess?
I'm seeing, a school board member who I went to high school with me beside me on his all fours, and I'm on my all fours. And I know the superintendent is over there dead. Of course, he wasn't, but that's what I thought. And it was just pandemonium. I don't like loud noises anymore.
Yeah,
I can tell you.
Yeah. Well, and I guess at some point after it's all over, I guess the first person you contact, I guess, is your wife.
Yeah, I couldn't talk to her. I had to send her a text.
Yeah, that's what I want.
I would have. I'd have broken down crying. It was overwhelming. But I sent her a text and said, "There's been a shooting at the school board. I'm fine. Everything's okay." Yeah. And it was one of those things where you just can't talk because your emotions are so strong. You don't realize that that's what's going to happen, but that's what it is.
Right.
I got a text. We met with the police. We're getting ready to meet with the police once they got there, probably 30 minutes later. And I got a text from a friend of mine who's a judge in Norman, Oklahoma, wanting to know if I was okay. She was watching it on CNN. Oh, I said, good Lord.
Yeah.
When it's live, it's live.
Yeah. After it's over, and it may have been next few days and next week, maybe even a month, but when you get back out from it, how did you process this?
Well, it's not until it's all over till you realize how serious it was. I mean, your adrenaline or whatever is, going on when it's happening. They say it only occurred over 6 minutes. It seemed like 30 to me, of course. But once you get away from it, the man in charge of security, Mike Jones, he was so upset, he ended up going to the emergency room with his heart after it was over with. I mean, he felt like he had failed us by not protecting us. Well, he did protect us. He saved all of our lives. But you get back from it. And in fact, we had a couple of meetings with some psychologists that came and sat down and talked to us and, about the feelings that we were going to have. And all that was very helpful. I have found, I talked to somebody the other day in anticipation you asked me all these questions. And I said, I don't know really how it's totally affected me. She said, you do too. You're very emotional.
Yeah.
When you didn't used to be.
I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing.
Easily.
Yeah.
I cry easily.
Yeah. Well, it's just.
I do. It is And I think it's from that incident. I think it changed my emotional makeup somehow. I don't understand it. I mean, I
Yeah.
don't think it's all bad. I mean,
Yeah.
I was in a hearing the other day and I was a witness and I got a little emotional because of what it was about. And I told the judge, I said, that's a character flaw. She said, oh, no, it is not.
Yeah.
You go right ahead. So,
Yeah. And so, I mean, you hear about, that PTSD. I mean, certainly, of course, it's real. But I mean, I would think that you've had to have suffered some PTSD from this event.
I think it is. I mean, I don't, I never been in a combat situation when I was in the Army or anything like that, but I would think that, I mean, it's the same kind of thing. I mean, you don't focus it on that event. You just know that you react differently to things than you did before the event. And so I guess that's what all of that's about.
And Franklin, I mean, you already talked about how it's this event affected you, being more emotional. How else would you say that this event has affected your life?
Brought my family very close together after it was over. And, it's just made me appreciate life every day and the fact that you get up and you leave the house to go to work. You don't know what's going to happen. This shooting was before all these awful shootings we're having in schools. But, the teachers go to work, children go to school, and these awful things happen to them. And they're in the same situation, except many of them are shot. We were very lucky not to be shot. But they witness that and they have no place to go. They're in a classroom or wherever they are. It's an awful experience. It is an awful, and it's just, and like I said, it is a feeling of total helplessness because you're not in charge.
Yeah. And that's got to be so hard, especially for somebody like you. I mean, you've been a lawyer, 51 years now. So back then, 51 minus 12. As a lawyer, well, I don't know. I guess I like to think that we're in charge, but a lot of times we're not. But
we think we are.
Yeah, we think we are. But to be, especially in the profession that we're in, and then have this feeling of total helplessness because you are at if this guy decides he wants you dead, you're going to be dead. What's that feeling like?
Helplessness is all I can say. I mean, it's just, can we get this over with? When is it going to be over? What's going to happen? Are the police going to get here? What is that going to look like? Who are they going to be shooting at? And it happens so fast.
Yeah.
Till, the aftermath and the thinking about it and talk to people about it is almost more traumatic because you have to focus on it, or you do focus on how bad it really was when at the moment you're able to think through it. And I would have thought I would panic, but I didn't panic. Obviously, I didn't move very fast. It was more of a trying to use my brain to figure this out, which it was really pretty useless.
Yeah.
But I didn't know it.
Have you looked back at the video?
Yeah, I've looked at it.
I mean, how does that, when you actually see kind of what happened? I know you were there, you lived it live, but to see it from the angle, I guess behind where the gunman was, the cameras are facing, kind of the back of the gunman, or although he was walking around, but facing you guys straight on. I mean, man, what was it like, say, the first time you saw it?
It was very difficult to watch. I mean, obviously, and obviously there were things that occurred that I don't even remember happening at the time. You're so focused on that gun, that looked like an elephant gun or something. Yeah. I don't know what it was, probably a 9mm, but until, I've looked at it and I've gotten where I'm able to talk about it. At first, it was hard to talk about, but I've gotten over the years where I'm able to talk about it, and I'm very lucky to have survived it. I think that, somebody was looking after us, and we got through it as a result of that, and I do believe that, and I think we're all very lucky. It's not anything I'd want any of my family to ever have to go through. I have a daughter who's a first grade teacher.
Oh yeah, I mean I get thinking about what's going on in the schools nowadays. That's got to be kind of tough.
And I got a daughter who also teaches middle school. I've got a couple of them teaching, and I worry about them in their classrooms, even though they're good schools. And it could never happen here. I'm telling you, it can happen here. It did happen.
Franklin, through all this, what have you learned about yourself from going through all this?
I'm a slow mover. I can tell you that. I learned that. I heard that from a number of people. That, how can you be so slow? Even at the time they were hollering at me on TV, they said, no, I don't know. I've learned that, the importance of family and your profession and the things that you do and how fragile life is. I mean, it can happen to anybody. I mean, if it can happen at little old Bay County School Board meeting talking about head lice, it can happen to you anywhere. And as we've seen in these schools, it can happen to the nicest schools, nicest people, innocent people. And it really bothers me. Whenever I see one of these shootings, I think, it's going to affect these people forever. And it's senseless.
Right. And along those lines, what advice would you give to others that go through like a traumatic experience like you've been through? What advice would you give, to them to maybe help them try to get over it?
Well, you have to rely on your friends. You have to rely on your family. And I think seeking some kind of counseling. Well, I didn't do any really formal counseling, but I met with a psychologist a couple of times. We had a group for all of us that were involved in it to try to tell us what to expect, how we were going to react, how our family was going to react, and to not be afraid to lean on people and open up to them. I think that's extremely important.
Right.
Because, it affects your whole family. It doesn't just affect you when you have an experience like this.
Right. And Franklin, I want to kind of broaden the question out because, the Rocket Motivation podcast, what we like to do on the show is, we bring people on who have dealt with and overcome adversity in their lives. And so it's kind of we want to give advice to people that are just going through some tough times. So like separate and apart from going through a traumatic experience like you did, just based upon your years of wisdom, and what you've been through. And I also know, and because we only got about a 30-minute show, we really don't have time to talk about it. I know you went through a surgery where you almost bled out and died, but based on your life experiences, what would you tell people that are just having a tough time or down on their luck?
To rely on your faith, to rely on your family. I mean, they're there for you, and you will need to be there for them just as much as they are there for you. Life is fragile. When you kiss your wife goodbye in the mornings, you may never see her again, and you got to be ready for that.
Well, Franklin, Franklin, I want to thank you so much for coming on because I know this may have not been the easiest thing for you to do to relive this and rehash it, but I'm so glad you did because I think people will really get something out of hearing your story and then the advice you give on, for those that are having a traumatic experience or just dealing with adversity. I mean, that's you give some great wisdom there, but I can't let you go right now though, because I always give the guest the parting shot. And so kind of, if you can, dig deep, kind of give us something else if you can that we hadn't already talked about, but give us something great to take us home.
Well, you got to have a little humor even in the worst of circumstances. Our law partner, Ross McCloy, has told me that I tried to die twice, that I'm not very good at it. And I'm not. And I appreciate that. And that's one thing I don't want to be good at.
Yeah, that's a great thing to be crappy at.
Well, in the surgery, when I was, had 23 units of blood and an hour's worth of CPR and then 3 electric shots, I mean, I died, but I never saw bright light either. And I don't know what that means. Yeah. I don't whether you're not going to see a bright light or, you got some more work to do. And I took that as you got some more work to do. And so I've gone about it with that attitude that I've got some more work to do. And that's where I am.
Well, like I've told you before, I hope 3 times is not the charm for your success in dying, because I tell you, Franklin, it's my pleasure and my honor to be your law partner. And even after learning this story and hearing you and us talking about it, it's even I'm even just more humbled and honored, to know you and be your partner.
Well, I appreciate it. It's just you got to take what every day brings you and deal with it.
Yep, I got you. Well, Franklin, thanks so much, and I guess get back to work.
I'm going back to work right now. Okay. Got a closing.
All right, see you, man.
Thank you.
All right, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
What a great episode with Franklin Harrison. It's hard to believe what he went through, but I encourage everybody, you got to go see this live. You can't even understand how tense it was until you see it live. So go to YouTube, just look up Bay County School Board shooting, and there's multiple videos of it. So I highly recommend you do that so you can put this whole thing into context and really get the feel of what it was like to be there. Anyway, we'll have another great guest next week on Rocket Motivation Podcast. See you then. Thanks again for listening to Rocket Motivation. I want to again thank our sponsor, my law firm, Hand Arundel Harrison Self, with offices in Mobile, Birmingham, Fairhope, and Athens, Alabama, and Destin, Panama City Beach, and Santa Rosa Beach, Florida. We are uniquely situated among the Southeast major law firms to provide legal direction to clients throughout Alabama and Northwest Florida. So whether you're looking for legal advice, litigators, or simply a partner you can trust, Hand Arundel Harrison Sale is there for you. Thank you for listening, and be sure to check out Hand Arundel Harrison Sale for all your legal needs. Visit our website at handfirm.com. And if you would like to get my book, Get Back Up, it's available at Amazon. Just put in Get Back Up and my name, Rod Cade, and the book will pop up. I'd appreciate it if you would subscribe to Rocket Motivation wherever you listen to your podcasts. And please rate and review the shows and spread the word about Rocket Motivation to your friends. So until next time, remember, never give up and always get back up.